probably showing cattle at the Stampede would be one, because you know, we always had cattle there. And it was and going to the Royal. I remember going on the trains to the Royal. I was older then, because I didn't go until I was through university, but I got in on the last 2 trips to the Royal by train, and that was quite an experience.
You were talking the other day, though, that you were about 3 or 4 years old when they had the Angus Field Day out at your house.
Oh yeah.
And they were serving hot dogs, and you thought that they were gonna eat your dog.
Yeah, that's right. I did. Well, there's a picture of that.
There's a picture of that
in the New Angus Herd book of that tour. The only thing that was wrong is it said I gave him the picture, and I gave it to Doug, and it says something about the picture's compliments of Orrin Hart, or supplied by Orrin Hart. I supplied the picture, but I'm in that picture, and I'm about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can always remember that. I thought they were going to eat my dog. Oh, I don't know, like shows were, especially Calgary because it was close, but we used to stay in dorms that were, it's the Blue Room now, or they don't call it that, West Canadian Room?
Yeah.
Up on top of the egg thing. That's where all the dorms were. And it was bunk bed after bunk bed, and that's where we used to always stay. And you wouldn't get much sleep anyhow, because you were always chasing around down the Midway or something, you know. There was no tie-outs in those days. So, but those would be some of the early memories. 4-H was pretty much the same too.
Well, yeah, but how old were you and Duncan when you met? Ronaldo.
Oh, 13.
Because
the time his son came was that we were 13.
Yeah, because that's his fondest memories of showing cattle with you guys at the Stampede.
Yeah, but that was his. Duncan Ronaldo was the Cisco kid, and my dad was a director on the Stampede from, I don't know, 1952 or something, and he obviously bonded with him. And the second, they used to always bring in a Western star like Roy Rogers or a Cisco Kid or Gene Autry or those type of people. And the second time the Cisco Kid came, whose real name was Duncan Ronaldo, he brought his son, who was the same age as me. And I had to look after him at Stampede, and I remember Richard helped us show cattle. So.
And then out of the blue, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
He phoned because they were inducting his dad into the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. And he wanted us to go down.
So we did.
So reconnected.
Yeah. But that was, we got Richard. It was, we always used to have a pile of cattle, and you didn't clip like you do today. We used to wash them and put blankets on them. And it'd be hotter than hell, and you'd blanket up these cattle. It was crazy, and you'd keep blankets on them until they were dry. And then you used a certain kind of soap, and they would shine like crazy.
That wavy comb?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's quite different. White halters, big white halters. You used to have aluminum show sticks that you screwed together.
Mm-hmm.
So. One of them for sure would be, because we did the first ever embryo transplant, and I remember it was all surgical in those days, and we got 20 embryos out of this cow, and we got 15 pregnancies, and that was the calves were born in 1976, I think.
Yeah.
So that would be one highlight that I could think of. A lot of show highlights too, I don't know if I can think of one in particular. But
Toronto with your steers.
Yeah, that was a highlight. I took 5 steers to Toronto once, and I just about, the story I found out afterwards, they used to go around and select cattle to go to Toronto, because one year you'd go CN and one year you'd go CP. So if it was a CN year, we would start in Calgary and have to go to Edmonton, and then out at CP was the opposite. The Edmonton people, northern people would come down. Anyhow, there was a government guy, an Angus guy, Hereford, and a Shorthorn guy, and the four of them used to go around, and the government guy and the Angus guy would decide on Angus herds they visited which ones were good enough to go. But the four of them put their heads together for selecting steers, and the steer show was a big deal in Toronto in those days. And I was told that I was just about got left, my group of 5 steers just about got left off. That would be 1971, I think. And they were the last choice to go. And I ended up getting reserve champion overall with them, you know. Well, the steers were so hard than it is today to predict what they're going to look like 2 months later, you know, when you actually show them. And so that's the way it was. And I got beat by some pulled Herefords from Saskatchewan. So I ended up being the best Alberta ones, where I was last, they thought, when we went. So that was a highlight, definitely. So.
Well, it was kind of an Angus limousine highlight too, that going to Las Vegas.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I went at it really more. 1969, my dad was president of what they call the Canadian Joint Beef Breeds, and that's the same as CBBC today. And there was this International Cattlemen's Expo in 1969, and that organization decided to take a display of cattle. And we took Angus, Hereford, Shorthorn, and Charolais, a bull, a herd bull, and a cow and calf. And we had this display. And it was, people could take individual enter bulls or something. They had a new way of judging. It was all done in stations, where you'd take your bull to a station, and they would decide his structure, and then he'd go on and they'd measure fat cover. And it never really took off, but the thing was sponsored by Art Linkletter. I don't know if you knew who he is. He was the guy that used to have little kids and do the show and interview him, but he was the one that financed the whole thing. And I went as a herdsman with this Canadian group. And my first experience of Las Vegas, which I didn't know much about at that time. And then one of my favorite stories is really not Angus, but across the way was Prince Pompadour, the first Limousin bull, and Parisienne, the first Simmental bull. And we had a parade one night, and they took the breeds of these herd bulls by alphabetical order. So I led the Angus bull. It was a Willowbar bull of Owen Hart's, and I led him, and I got back to my pen and I was putting him away, and there was a hell of a commotion across the aisle, and the guy was leading Prince Pompadour, and taking his halter off, the bull took him and knocked him down and was beating the shit out of him. And
but that's when Prince Pompadour had horns.
Yeah, he had horns. And the guy was down with his, like, flat out hanging onto the bull's head like this, and he was just pounding him. And our trucker, George Shahada, he was a big guy from Innisfail. He and I were first on the scene, and I remember we opened the gate a little bit and tried to pull the guy out, and all we did is rip his shirt because he was hanging on. So we went in again and we said, "Let go!" And as all this commotion, the crowd was gathering, and we got the guy out, and then there was this big black security guard. He came over and he pulled out they all were armed. He pulled out his pistol and he had it up here and he said, "You want him dead? You want him dead?" And if somebody had said yes, I think the first Limousin bull in North America would have been toast. But after that, they dehorned him. So,
moral of the story.
Yeah. But anyhow, so those were fun trips. We went down there, and well, I mean, it's not really Angus, but I remember we got there and first night, we went to bed, I would guess about 10 o'clock, because we had to look after cattle, and it was all these old people playing slot machines, and you got up in the morning at 6 o'clock to go look after your cattle. They were still playing the slot machines. So So,
But we didn't do much Angus after I came up. I mean, we still had the big herd and we
Yeah.
still did the bull sale and we didn't show as much,
yeah.
as many Angus as we were the Limousin.
In the 70s, I was always really jealous of my American friends. They could have, like, it's like it is here today, but they could have a ranch bull sale and sell all their bulls. Boom. And my dad, he'd take 6 bulls to Calgary Bull Sale, and 6 to Edmonton, and 6 to Lethbridge, and 6 to Fort Macleod, and Innisfail, or wherever. He'd be gone all spring selling bulls. And you had to haul to break them, and so they could all lead. They all had to be kind of like show cattle. And it was a lot of work. And so there was a sale manager at that time, Jim Baldridge, called himself National Livestock Brokers from Nebraska. And he did a lot of sales up here. He was a very good auctioneer too in his day. And he was one of these poor sods that died of cancer before he was 60. But anyhow, Jim and I became quite good friends, and he helped me put together a bull sale in Billings, Montana in 1974. And he wanted me to put together 60 to 80 bulls, and I had about 40. And so I got people like Ralph Griffiths, who was Corralta. His son was, or grandson was Doug Griffiths, the MLA for a while there, later on. And Jim Clark was a breeder from up at Sedgwick, a really nice old guy. And Orville Strandquist, and some of the Spadies from up by Alliance. And so we went down to Billings, and we had it worked really good. And so we kept going, and then as the 70s closed, there was an outfit called the American Agriculture Movement. And they were like the front runners to RCAF, and they didn't like Canadians coming in and selling their bulls in their territory. So they picketed at our sale once, drove around in a Datsun pickup truck in the thing with a placard saying "Buy American." They phoned a bomb scare into our sale once. So I figured the way to solve this was to buy a piece of land down there. And so I got my finances together, and I sold some land that I had tucked my dad out of up here, and I bought a place in this little town, or near this little town called Absaroka, Montana. And we set up, we had about 50 cows there, and a full-time guy, and had bull sales there, mostly to market our Angus bulls. And it went really good over the years, and that's how I met Marci, because she came from Absaroka, Montana. Her dad had the garage in town and the bulk gas dealership and so on. And anyhow,
So we did that for 24 years.
Yeah, I bought this place in 1980, and we sold it finally in 2004. And it was, well, a few things happened that made us think about selling it. We were working on a deal to sell our place in there, and we had this financial advisor, and she first of all said that I should get rid of all U.S. assets because they were highly taxable if I left them to Marci, who is a dual citizen, and Americans wouldn't care about that. They just consider her an American citizen, and it would be highly taxable. And then the other thing, BSE had hit, and we couldn't move cattle back and forth, and RCAF had got tremendously strong, and they centered out of this little town of Columbus, which was about 20 miles away from our place. So it was really a hard business to grow, because as soon as they found out you were Canadian, they didn't want, there was such peer pressure not to buy from a Canadian. So anyhow, we decided that maybe somebody was telling us something, and the real estate had done fairly well, so we decided to cash in. So, but that's how we marketed our Angus bulls for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And then we eventually took over a Limousin bull sale in High River, where the guy retired, and then we started selling Angus bulls at that time for them, and now we're doing it all here. So.
And then Amanda, Was it a 4-H show heifer that was an Angus heifer?
Yeah. So I had a Highland Evening Tinge. That was one of my very first Angus show heifers. And that summer I took her for my very first time to the Bashaw show. And that kind of opened a lot of doors to friendships and relationships that I have with a lot of industry people now that are my age. I also, other than, and on the other side of family, got to work for my aunt and uncle, so Dave Mary Beth Sibbald from Triple S, and dabbled in the Red Angus side, helping them out with their operation, going to Red Roundup, and helping with their sale. And with ours, I only ever had the one Angus show heifer, but we've had lots of opportunities with the bulls. And now that we're going back into Angus more, it's kind of nice to start over and start collecting again. So it's been pretty fun. I don't have stories like he does, so
Thank God.
thank God.
Yeah.
But Amanda knows more people than you could ever imagine of all breeds. She's incredible. We have a friend, Keith Cassie, who was a limousine sale manager, and then he managed a bunch of Red Angus sales. He said, in Canada, if you want to know about somebody, phone Amanda and ask her.
Yeah, and that's one thing. When I went to school in Colorado, I got to meet a lot of American producers, and Colorado is a large Angus state. And so I went to when they had their national junior show in Colorado as part of representing for Colorado State University, and I met so many different. So it's definitely being on both sides of the Angus and the limousine world, getting to meet a lot of different people. It's been pretty good. I'm pretty lucky. Well, and for those of us that, like, I'm 5th generation, my kids will be 6th. Like, we are so lucky to be in an industry that these people go from your friends to your family. You always know that you have somebody that has your back no matter what, and it doesn't matter what breed they're in. You can obtain knowledge from whoever. If you're seeking it, you just need to make the right phone calls, send the right text, email. There are lots of opportunities, and that's what's great about the purebred business. And then you get into further sections, whether it's feedlot or growers. Like, it's lots of opportunity.
I think we have more young people involved in the purebred thing than other facets of agriculture.
Yeah.
You know, you hear about so many young people leaving the farm, because, but you look through the cattle barn like at Agribition or something, there's a lot of young people involved. So, which I think really is good for the purebred business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they're kids that are working on the cattle or their owners. They're young.
Yeah.
A lot of the owners are young.
I agree, and more so than, say, in the commercial
Yeah.
cattle business or the grain business or
Yeah.
something like that. So,
The opportunities are there if you're seeking them, and that's the great thing about the purebred business. Like, right now, I know it's not Angus, but I'm the youngest person to have ever been president of a cattle association, and I'm 3rd generation, so both dad, my grandfather, myself. And so, like, that's a huge feather in anybody's cap. And for that to show even in one breed association, there are other associations that have these multi-generation, and that's something that all of us should be really proud of. When I went to Colorado, I looked at other opportunities, but I don't know. I always liked coming home. I'd always ask about calving, bull sale, and those things, like, you just appreciate a lot more. I think and that was the one thing, like, when we were all at Highway 8 together, I went and started working for Dave Mary Beth, just for somebody to go work for and just learn something different. And then at cattle shows, I worked for other people because you just need to branch out. But yeah, I always got called back home. And I think the other thing too is you can't get into any trouble because somebody's always going to tell your mom and dad.
Shit, I remember telling my dad to sell the ranch once. When I was going to university, I didn't think I was coming back.
When Rob and I met, I worked for my father as a pump jockey, a minor mechanic, and a secretary for his business. And then I also worked as a bartender, and I also worked for a mining company. But I grew up in agriculture to the point when we lived on a small ranch just outside of town. We had sheep, we had cows, we had horses. So in the town I grew up in, there was only 500 people, and it was an agricultural town. So at the garage we fixed as many tractors, if not more, than you did somebody's car. And so, yeah. So when I met Rob, it was nothing. I told him one time, I said, it's not any different marketing your product, whether I'm selling gas and oil, you're selling cows. You got to stand behind your product. You got to be proud of your product. And it doesn't matter, either way. Livestock.
Customer's always right.
Customer service. Customer's always right. So.
Well, I
got to learn from Rob's dad, because Rob's not that great a bookkeeper or record keeper or anything like that.
Well, I was good at doing my cattle records, but not the other kind of records.
No, but you didn't like sitting down and registering your calves.
Oh, I did that. Yeah.
I know you did it. You didn't like it.
Angus ones were a pain in the ass because you used to have to write every one of those cards out by hand.
Yeah, and it was on these little.
Yeah. Cool.
So when I came into their life, it was almost like Rob's dad just kind of went, phew, finally. Somebody that I can trust that's going to take over and do the books, do the registrations, make sure this is done, that's done. And so now, Amanda.
I also fall on the negative record keeping side of things.
So, when we started getting heavily back into the limousine, or the Angus thing, I said to her, Tag, you're it. You get to do the Angus. I'll do the limo side.
The staff at the office is wonderful if you have any questions. I highly recommend calling and bugging those girls or sending repeated emails over silly questions. So, they're wonderful.
Her dog.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's...
Oh, let him in.
I don't really have any nasty stories about Rob. So...
Do you have any good ones you'd like to share that he hasn't touched on? Anything that stands out?
Well, I think it was kind of... Lately, I think it was an honor that he received. It's kind of ironic. His dad's memorial award from the Canadian Beef Breeds Council. You also, and this
Canadian
is just
Cattleman of the Year.
Yeah.
Sorry, boss.
So, there's just Rob. He's actually done a lot in our industry, and I'm talking about the purebred industry in total. You've judged around the world. You've judged across Canada. You've judged across the United States. And I look at it this way: if people don't respect you and respect your philosophy on cattle and how you look at them, they're not going to ask you to do that. And so, yeah. And then now, Amanda's getting asked to do this.
Well, one of the biggest honors we had was judging the Supreme, equivalent of the Supreme, they call it the Interbreed at the Royal Highland Show in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Edinburgh.
And that was 20 years ago.
I know.
That was 2000.
2000.
Oh.
2000 does not feel like 20 years ago.
No. I think as a family, I think the three of us have built a great business, working hard. So,
Yeah, we've slowed down a little since, like we have a strange setup today in the fact that we sold our old family farm in 2005, but we still have the use of it. We still rent it back because the people that bought it, who are our land developers, there's houses right up against it, and they haven't been able to develop it because of the water, sewage, and those types of things, highways, and so we rent it back, and if we, and then we got another chunk of land just 2 years ago that's north of Bragg Creek, north and west of Bragg Creek, and we don't do any haying anymore or any crops. David does the haying. We got about, I don't know, 300-400 acres of hay, and David does it, and we give him half for doing it, and so we don't have to have a lot of machinery or anything like that, and so we just feed cows and clean pens and bed cows in the winter, and then clean the pens in the spring and put on a bull sale, and everything's changed with bull sales too, that they're all doing videos, and Amanda sort of looks after you do all the work before the sale, you know, rather than having a big crew at the sale, because you don't have a sale ring anymore. We've got that 40 by 60 barn down there, and there's just tables and chairs in it, and an elevated table for the auctioneer, and 2 or 3 video boards, and you can walk in there and get a meal or get a drink and sit down, and you don't have to move. Bulls are all in the pens when you want to go look at them, and with what's happened with COVID-19, it made our whole industry pretty simple this spring, where, you know, you're getting cut down to 50 people and 15 and so on. And people could come the day before and look at bulls and bid online or bid on the phone, and you know, we were actually one of the few industries that I think weathered the storm pretty good. You know, the only people I saw with tough bull sales are the people that didn't do the videos, and then there wasn't enough labor in the video companies at the last minute to run around and do the video, so they had to put up still pictures, which are already in the catalog when they were selling a bull, and that didn't work near as good for some of those people. But
the whole idea when we sold Highway 8, and Rob was going to kind of start to slow down a little bit. Amanda was off at university, just kind of slow down. We were going to keep 25 cows just to stay busy. Yeah. Didn't work.
25 cows plus some.
yeah.
I've heard that so many times from people.
Well, I think we were trying to breed, I counted up the other day, 84 head, counting yearling heifers, and there's only about 15 of them. So we got lots of cattle. And then we decided well, we always had Angus bulls in our sale, and we had a guest consigner for a while, and then I decided he didn't continue with us, and because he switched his calving from January to April, and it's pretty damn hard to get April bulls to semen test for a March sale, so we decided to buy bulls. So I went and bought Doug Henderson's bulls the last year. Doug was alive, and because I grew up with Doug and Linda, like I escorted Linda when she was 16 to the teen conference. She was the teen queen of Olds or something, and she asked me to be her escort. So anyhow, but I've known Doug and Linda forever, and well, actually Linda fits in between Doug and I in age. She is just older than Doug was, but he had some health problems. I can remember loading bulls with him, and it wasn't a very strenuous job, and he was just sweating like a stuffed pig. And I look back, and I don't think he was very healthy. I think he knew he had some heart problems right then and there, because it was only about a month after that he died. But anyhow, so we've been buying bulls to put in our bull sale, and that's when we decided to, because see, I when my son moved up west to Olds, we leased up what Angus cows we had to him. Well, that was 2005, so we kind of, those cows are long gone now, because, so we decided, and so now we got about 20 Angus cows again, so.
Yes.
Well, it was sure a big change, yeah, to go to video sales, yeah.
Well, they've changed a lot even since I've been involved.
Like when we used to do the Montana one, for example, the 2-year-olds came from up here. The yearlings were sold from the ranch down there. So then Rob and I would go show in Denver. He'd drop me off in Montana at my parents', and they live right next door. Well, not at that point, but they lived in the same area as the ranch. He would come home, drop the show cattle off, turn around, load the liner with the 2-year-old bulls. Anything that was left over that couldn't go on the liner, then he brought them back down anyway with the trailer. And then we'd let him settle for a day, and then we would start washing bulls. And it didn't matter if it was 20 below Fahrenheit, whatever. And then you'd have to get all of the barns cleaned, the pens bedded, the food made. Thank God my mother used to help me do the food and all of that, and then deliver afterwards. And then we would finally, so we would leave home usually around the 3rd of January, and we would get home somewhere around the first week in February. And then when we sold that place and then moved down to High River doing the bulls and stuff like that, it was basically the same kind of thing. It was way harder than it is now. Now all I do is cook the lunch, set the bar up, make sure the bar's cleaned, and 45 minutes later everything's over and done with.
Well, Amanda looks after all the bulls.
Amanda does
Takes
all of
pictures
the
of all the
catalogs, the bulls,
and then all the video. So whoever DMLS sends out.
Yep.
But you do the pictures for the catalog and work.
And then
work
go
with
up and
Katie
help semen
Songer. I don't know if
test.
you know Katie, that's who Amanda works with on our ads and catalogs. So I think it's a lot easier the way it is with videos, but you know, you sure do most of the work ahead of the sale rather than at the sale.
Yeah, it takes off a huge amount of stress, I think, compared to like how they were saying when we used to do our sales in High River or in Montana. And even when you do, you can have it's just a calm morning. You can do your stuff and visit with your buyers as they're coming. You're not stressing about getting everybody cleaned up before. Sure, you blow them off first thing in the morning or the day after, or day before, pardon me. But it's just a lot smoother of a transition when you're bringing them home to sell.
Well, the biggest thing that's also changed is our calving. You know, we used to, like the scenario that Marci's describing when we used to have the bull sales in Montana, we wouldn't calve anything till we came home. Now our sale, instead of the last Saturday of January, is the 3rd week in March, but we're all done calving by the 1st of March. We actually even going to go back into December a bit with some calves next year, because well, we had our 2 high-selling Angus bulls this year were out of heifers that we had purchased that were supposed to calve in early January, and both calved in December. And so I said to these guys, I said, what's the matter with having a few December calves? Because they're easier to semen test, and you know, we're not raising 2-year-old bulls again where they wreck everything.
And who's busy around Christmas anyway?
Yeah.
You're home, usually.
Yeah, you're home around Christmas, so why not calve at Christmas?
See, and the other thing about doing the 2-year-old bulls, too, is when we were had the big groups of the Angus bulls were in one pen, and then the Limousin 2-year-olds were in another pen, and then they're like teenage boys with bad testosterone. They started fighting, so they'd sit there and bang and bang and bang and bang, and then wreck and tear everything up. You go down to the bull barn in the mornings to go feed. Angus bulls are in with the Lima bulls. Lima bulls are, and now this lovely thing of not feeding 2-year-old bulls is fantastic. The yearling bulls, my opinion, are way quieter.
Yeah, we were really lucky this year with the opportunity when we fed with at Dave Mary Beth's place this year. They created a bull growing facility for themselves and built an extra pen for us. So Dave and Mary Beth and Dylan and Carissa and Dylan's daughter Lena were out there all the time. And we're 20 minutes away, so my kids and I could go out rather than feeding at Strathmore. We used to feed at Cattleland. So you're seeing a lot more temperament on both sides of our breeds. So, and you can sort those out so much easier when you're constantly having somebody go through them. And that's a great thing too. It's all about facility.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's a lot easier, I think, just selling yearling bulls compared to the old days of just selling 2-year-olds. And as I said, even before we got to selling Montana, the halter breaking and the teaching them to lead and
Oh yeah, that was the other lovely thing that he taught me when I first moved up here. Is guess what? We're gonna go halter break the 2-year-old bulls.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why the hell aren't you doing this when they're
Yeah.
yearlings?
That's one thing I can say. I have no fear of halter breaking anything that's larger because as children, we helped halter break 2-year-old bulls. So when we do our halter breaking run of all the bulls, like when they're 9 months old, it is a breeze compared to when we used to do it as them being 2-year-olds.
well, 20 months old or something.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care. They're still close to 2.
Yeah.
They were still bigger than they should have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of the.
Well, the other thing is the damage bulls would do. You'd move them. Like
You go to bring them out of the bull barn up to the halter breaking pens, and they destroy everything on the way.
All they'd want to do is fight, and and you bring them out again to vaccinate them or do something, or test them to go to Montana, and bang, they'd have to destroy everything again, and so it was tough raising 2-year-olds.
And it didn't matter what breed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, we've had lots of learning opportunities.
I think our life is a lot simpler today, and we don't have to worry about haying or combining like we used to, and putting up silage, and so. And now, like as Amanda mentioned, Dave and Mary Beth, Dylan, they built this new facility for feeding their own bulls, and boy, it's nice to have them there, because Cattleland had put us in a small pen, and then they wouldn't bed them, and like our bulls were so clean this year.
Yeah.
And you just didn't even have to scrape where they'd be just tagged with shit.
They were healthier too.
Oh yeah.
Dave and Mary Beth and Dylan are true herdsmen. Like, they care about it doesn't matter if it's their product or ours. They care about the condition of the bulls at the end. So we talked, and we said thank you so many times, but it's nice to have a family. Yeah, we're in competition on our blacks, but to have somebody that can help us out, like, it's a great relationship that we have with them.
Well, if we were still doing our Highway 8, we would still have to put up or do grain and do hay and do silage. We just don't do it now. Somebody does it for us. So that kind of thing wouldn't have changed much, but
I don't think much has changed at all, because we still calve basically the same way that we have calved for years.
yeah, we've got nice facilities for cold weather calving, as long as we get the right ones in the
We
barn.
always barn calve down there.
So
I think, and along with bull sales changing, how they've changed, if you look at the show side of things. Like there's still that camaraderie at shows. It's just maybe techniques have changed a little bit. We actually use blowers instead of blankets now,
Yeah.
but
Clip them.
we clip them differently. But you know, the baseline of it, the marketability of your animal, the growing of friendships, has stayed. Just organically has changed with time, but yeah, the baseline has changed.
But yeah, I can't think of anything that we don't still basically do that we've always done.
But it's still the same. You can see the good marketers. You know,
Yeah.
People that know how to sell. It's a real art to be a good salesman, but you can sure watch people, and you know who are the great marketers that'll promote cattle or whatever, and the ones that are the opposite, that have the great cattle but aren't good marketers.
Yeah.
So.
Getting through COVID.
Yeah.
That's just humanity in general, I think.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
But it's
'cause
going to affect
that's changed
it's
a
going to
lot because
affect
no shows and
no
that
shows,
kind
no
of thing, and
sales.
way board meetings
Video.
are for associations or
Annual meetings are going to be video.
so that has changed a lot this year. Hopefully we'll get back to.
I think little kids, as far as the Bashaw show, the Claire's Home, Heifer show, they're missing out because Holt, Amanda's son, his first time he showed there, he was 4.
Yeah.
And so
At Claire's Home.
at Claire's Home, but they're missing that fun thing that she grew up in. And the 4-H, you're selling of your 4-H animals, and you're just learning how to market through that. So, because that was one thing we were adamant on her, is if you've got a steer, you've got to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and Dad aren't going to sell it. You sell it.
We would give her
List of people to
list of
phone.
people that she could phone that might want to buy a steer because we did a lot of business with them, you know, and so on, and but it was it used to make me so frustrated because in our 4-H club out here they had a parents marketing committee, and the parents would go around in Cochrane or say and get businesses to buy a steer, and they wouldn't teach the kids anything, and you know it should have been the kids going around and trying to market the steer. So I wouldn't let Amanda and Laura participate in that. So
Because they would have a minimum bid for a steer.
Their minimum bid was $210, and
well,
and
it wasn't always the same. It was
Yeah.
depending on what the market was.
but like say 1 year's $210, and then but Laura and I could get $3 or even a little higher. I think between Hamilton's, Wyatt, Wasey, and Joel were in our club, and Megan and Colby McLeod, and Laura and I, we were the purebred kids in that club, and between the 7 of us, we would always outdo, probably by $1.50, those kids that participated in the club by. And then some of them caught on that, hey, maybe I should be the one making the phone call, not my mom and dad. So, we're lucky, for both Rob and Gail Hamilton and Rod and April McLeod and mom and dad, they pushed us, and now all of us, all 7 of us, are successful, and maybe not in cattle industry, but in other industries, we've gone on to do that and be able to market ourselves and market our products.
Exactly. And I'm hoping that, I don't know, that we have taught Amanda good things from being in the Angus business, the limousine business. So,
Well, I think definitely have to have a product to sell, but you have to have integrity, or if you don't, if people don't like you, you're not going to do well. But so you have to present yourself is really what you have to do when you're selling cattle, because it's pretty competitive out there, and by presenting yourself, the potential customer has to have confidence in you to treat them right. They're always right. If you got a bull that doesn't function the way he's supposed to or something, you better look after it, or you'll never have that person again. And if you look after it, then that spreads, or if you don't look after it, it spreads fast. So I think those are the things that you have to have a lot of personal integrity and honesty, and look after customers the way you'd want to be treated. So if you don't, you're not going to be in business very long. Bad news spreads fast. They came in 1908, and I've got some old catalogs that's got some pictures in it that I was going to give you too, and from what I understand, they had a really good business going, and then the Depression hit, and of course that was considered a luxury, and people didn't need to buy pianos, so I think their business really went into the tank, and it did actually last till 1945, but nobody was around to want to take it over, and in the family, so my grandfather finally closed it up then. But that's why he went farming and bought some land west of Calgary, and then they had a big expansion. That was in 1932, and then they had a big expansion in 1951 where they bought some neighboring land that is actually the Glencoe Golf Course today, a lot of it, and Elbow River, is it Elbow River? Yeah, Elbow River Estates was part of that land that they bought then, and my dad sold that in 1972, something like that. Yeah. Anyhow, but we have a Matthews piano, which we finally found, and Marci spent almost as much money getting it refinished and fixed up as we did buying it, but at least we have an upright. But a lot of them were grand pianos too, so. But my cousin's got a baby grand.
Mm-hmm.
That.
There's a few of them floating around.
Yeah.
So I don't know if, sorry I had to go blow my nose, but when you were talking about the advice, I don't know, did you ever say anything about the showing? We always taught Amanda never to be mad at your competitor.
Yeah. I always say, as long as your competitors are honest people, they're not trying to do anything that you're not trying to do. So if you want to be mad at somebody when you stand last in class, be mad at the judge. but don't be mad at your competitor just because they beat you. And be gracious when you do win.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be cocky when you win.
Really?
Because the next time you might lose. So
I think, especially the older I've gotten, with the showing, is there's a lot of people that are doing the exact same thing you're trying to do. I had a Limousin Bull, Boston, who was not a favorite to win. All through the fall previously, other bulls had won at Olds, Lloyd, Farm Fair. I was actually in Canmore having Rev, so I didn't get to go to exhibition.
But that was the only time. Let me tell that story, because it was the only time Amanda had this good bull, and we sold him in our bull sale as a yearling, and Keith Cassee from Virginia helped create a deal, and he sold walking rights to Lynn Combest. You probably know Lynn, and he sold American semen rights, and he sold some semen shares to other Canadian breeders, and he totally brought 30,000. And Lynn wanted a good bull because he was going to disperse his Limousin herd that fall. So anyhow, we had this plan that we were going to, Lynn would use them, and then we would take him to the stud and get semen to satisfy the American semen rights, and then we would show him as a yearling. Well, Lynn had...
Because he was shown as a calf.
Lynn had, he was a bull calf champion at Agribition as a calf. This was before Lynn bought him. Anyhow,
You got stuck at Alta.
well, first of all, Lynn had bull trouble, so he had to use him longer, so he was out as a yearling bull out longer. Then we put him into Alta and drew the semen, and then he got stuck in a quarantine of all the export bulls. So by the time we got him back,
It was too late to
we
get him
looked
fall
at him
ready.
and said, man, he's about 150 pounds lighter than he had. And so anyhow, Lynn put him in his sale, and his cousin Neil Brown, who would be a brother of Lee's, he bought him. And so Neil said to me, he said, well, if you want to show him next year, I'll be done with him the end of June. So anyhow, I went and gathered the bull up at the end of June the following year. So like the bull is going to be shown as a 2-year-old. And we fed the hell out of him. And then my showman got pregnant. So we had to have another plan. And so I got a hold of, in those days we had a summer sale here in August. So I had the bull home and we were feeding him, and I said to Rocky Payne, I said, would you show this bull for me at Agribition? He said, sure. So he said, you got to get him there, though. I don't have room for a big bull to take it. So I put the word out, and Jim Smith from Checkmate from Carstairs, I don't know if you know him or not, he's a Simmental breeder. Now he said, I'll haul him over for you. So he did, and Rocky looked after him, and nobody'd seen this bull for a long time, really, or thought anything of it. And as you were saying, other bulls had won some of the other shows that weren't quite as important. So I flew over to Agribition, and as I got on the plane, I phoned Marci, and I said, any news from Canmore yet? No, nothing. And when I was lining up to get rent a car, I phoned again. Yep, we got a baby boy. So the next morning was show morning, and Boston went out and won the whole show. So that was kind of fun. Worked out as good as it could have.
But I think when it comes to being gracious, is you need to congratulate everybody, whether you agree or not.
Oh, yeah.
And shake a hand, look somebody in the eye, and tell them they did a good job. Because, like Dad said, they're just trying to do exactly what you are.
As long as they do it honestly.
And it comes to, like, those people, especially it doesn't matter what breed you're in, those are the people that will be the foundation eventually. And so you need to be able to build relationships. And just because one guy gives one opinion one day, 7 guys could give different opinions 7 days, right? So it's interesting when these things happen. You have bulls that are contenders all year long, and then you can have one come out of the nowhere. So it's fun. It doesn't matter what breed you're in. It's those opportunities to kind of spice it up a little bit are good. It doesn't necessarily have to please everybody all the time, but sometimes it's nice to be the surprise.
Well, in judging, it's the same thing. You got to judge cattle with a lot of integrity too.
Yeah. Just because your friend's on the halter doesn't mean that you can't put him in last place when he's pulling something behind him that looks horrible.
I would obviously say my dad for keeping our longevity of Highland Stock Farms going. Probably my Uncle Dave, my mom, and my Aunt Mary Beth. And I think peers that are my age that I really look up to, Jordan Buba She's somebody that has gone from their big operation at Lewis Farms to doing her own thing. And, you know, you have to have peers that are your age too that you admire. So we have lots of people that you can, there's a long list, but those are probably the foundation people for me, I would say.
I got asked that same question when they did they did an article in the Limousin Voice on us not too long ago, and I got asked that same question, and I mentioned 4 people, I think, and I mentioned Don Pahilko. I didn't necessarily. The only difference in the question, you asked me about Angus people maybe, but I mentioned in there Don Pahilko is a Charolais breeder of Sandan Charolais. He was an unbelievable marketer, and you know, when I first met him on that trip to Las Vegas in 1969, they were selling cattle for $50,000 when we were selling them for 500, sort of idea. And I watched that Charolais thing from the start, and he was the leader at that time. And I mentioned Jim and Ruth McBride, who were Golden View Farms. That'd be Bud McBride's brother. And they dispersed in 1989, I think. But they were terrific marketers too, and knew how to. They were a team. Like Jim knew little about cattle, but a lot about selling, and Ruth knew about the cattle and the pedigrees, and they were just a terrific team to watch. And I mentioned Lynn Combest because I traveled a lot with Lynn over the years, either helping each other at shows or traveling to shows or sales or whatever. We spent a lot of time together. He is somebody I had a lot of respect for and his opinions and so on. And then the last one I mentioned was Keith Gassi, who was a sale manager, still is. And he was very creative when things were really going good. And, you know, he could, you know, put together things like, he was the first one I ever saw, you know, you'd have a little heifer calf. A good example, Marci had a heifer calf once, and he said, well, we're going to sell half her with an option to double. And she ended up, the guy bought the half for $11,000, and the runner-up was $10,500. But $10,500 all of a sudden produced a $22,000 heifer because the guy that bid 11 said, "I'll take her all." You know, so stuff like that Keith would do, and then I remember another time Marci had a bunch of embryos calves, and this guy, we had one red-horned heifer, and he wanted to buy her, and but in that same sale, she wasn't in the sale, but in the sale, we were selling a flush on the cow to the mother, and so Keith said to this guy, he said, well, you can have her for $10,000, but if you really want her, we'll sell her to you for $5,000 if you'll guarantee us $15,000 on the flush. And the guy went for that too. So he had a guaranteed spot to start the sale, you know, to start it off with a big bang. He was very clever at doing, you know, when everything's going good, it's a lot easier to be good. But he was very clever at doing stuff like that. So he was some of the people I've watched. But I don't know. Jim Miller was somebody too. Dawn and so on families. Her dad was clever at marketing cattle too. He's somebody I learned a lot from. We became really good friends. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, but he was a very clever marketer too, and he was really good at what he did. And he wasn't a cattleman, really. He came from the computer business. So he moved his family to Bashaw just to get him out of the city. So.
I did not know that.
Yeah. What the hell was the name of his company? Dynatech or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. But Dawn was about, when I first laid eyes on her, she was probably about 12, you know. So, and then the two boys were younger. So. But yeah, I'd take the Miller girls and send them to Denver, and shit, everybody knew who Highland Stock Farms was by the time I got down there. So,
Opportunities in marketing, just saying.